Hi everyone, I'm super excited to host Guido Maciocci. He is a founder and director of AECFoundry. If you are not following Guido on LinkedIn, you're missing out on the cutting edge tech. He has written amazing blogs. He's also part of a AEC Tech AI WhatsApp group and sharing a lot of insights and opinion which are very useful based on his background and experience in the industry and as well as building products, so getting both sides. So thanks a lot for being on the show, Guido.
My pleasure, Mayur. Nice to be here.
So take us back to your college days and what series of events in your life led you to this current role.
Subsequently, I was lucky enough, just by pure coincidence, the university brought on new faculty from London, very forward thinking, innovative faculty from UCL and the AA. So it was almost like getting an AA and Bartlett education without the same associated cost of living in London. But that sort of opened up my mind to many different things, primarily programming, parametric design, but this was before Grasshopper. So we used to do a lot of stuff in Maya and Mel scripting and basically leveraging modeling software to build automated workflows that were based around form exploration, as you would expect from AA style and Bartlett style education. And that was also infused with a lot of ideas about interaction design and digital media design, just because of the professors that were there. So I did a lot of stuff with sort of hardware, software, and interaction design during my theses. I used to tinker a lot with things like Arduino and circuits. That was actually my first introduction to visual programming, again, before Grasshopper. And then sort of the global financial crisis hit, no jobs, went back home to Italy to look for work, ended up working in a very traditional, I had the hope of bringing these new technologies to a very traditional industry. Unfortunately, that didn't materialize here in Italy, but that sort of took me into very traditional architectural work, competitions, interior design, and so forth. And I ended up working for this company that was very much into fabrication, like they were very careful and highly detailed kind of Japanese style interior design. And they used to work closely with fabricators, both digital fabrication and traditional fabrication. And that got me interested very much in sort of the making of architecture in the built environment. And at that precise moment in time, through an absolute pure coincidence, there happened to be a Grasshopper workshop in Rome. I'd been looking at Grasshopper just out of curiosity and interest because I was interested in techie stuff and renderings and visualization and modeling. I took that workshop and sort of, to go back to your question, what are the key moments in your life that put you on this trajectory? That workshop is literally what put me here today. If it wasn't for that, it probably, none of this would have happened. But there was that workshop and then a series of workshops I did. I started working with the organizers to organize them myself and helping and assisting. And I just went deep into that world of computational design at the very, very early stages. From that point, I went to Australia, again on an absolute chance encounter with this very tiny company at the time. It was just two young guys, very much like myself, very much into fabrication and computational design and how computational design could be leveraged for that. And I worked for that company for 10 years while I was in Australia. And we were the absolute leaders in computational design for DFMA, not only in Australia, but really across the world. There were very few competitors. I would say companies like Gary Tech were at the same kind of technical level and mastery of production, automating design to production processes, or D2P in Switzerland is another really good one in that space. That's the kind of work we did, working on very complex architectural projects, a lot of geometry and material optimization for fabrication, and transforming really complex systems into industrialized and modular systems that could be assembled very easily offsite and installed as the end results. Many iconic projects, a lot of them in Sydney, still today beautiful buildings. And then from there, one of the clients was Lend-Lease Digital, and they were just building up the whole team to then build what is now Podium, that broke off as its own independent startup. And at the time, this was 2018, 2019, this was one of the very first web-based building configurators. There was Giraffe that was just coming up. Archistar was just popping up. TestFit popped up a couple of years later, but we were at the very sort of spearhead of that whole web app for AEC style software. And we were responsible for building the algorithms and all of the sort of parametric models and logic in the back end to power this front end experience of being able to configure a modular system based on all of the their company's supplier network and supply chain for fabrication. Like the output wasn't feasibility, it was a fabrication digital twin that was generated in CATIA based on the inputs that we would configure on the front end. That put me in a professional commercial software development environment for,
Mm.
the best part of 2.5 years. I had a kind of a hybrid role between product management and technical leadership and implementation. So I would do both some of the development of the algorithms, but generally I would lead the team to develop the spatial optimization and configuration of residential buildings. And that's what got me interested in, of course, software programming, not scripting for AEC, but commercial software development and engineering, and working together with brilliant software engineers that we had. We learned so much about best practices and, CI/CD pipelines and automating the whole engineering stack and how you implement modular systems and solid principles and object-oriented programming, all the stuff that makes software engineering, software engineering. In AEC, we often think that we know, right? But until you're like immersed in a commercial software development and engineering environment, it's impossible to acquire that experience by building very specific things like plugins or add-ins for our software. It's a whole different ball game. So that got me interested in sort of product management and software engineering and product development at large, not specifically for AEC. And after the whole COVID pandemic, when Australia reopened its borders and let us out, my family and I decided to come back to Italy, and that's where I founded AECFoundry. Not so much to carry on what I was doing in Australia on the DFMA side of things, but really to blend that with product thinking, product development, broader software engineering, and broader business process automation, and finding how to bridge the gap between very AEC specific workflows and larger scale business operations, and how to connect the two, which is still today a very big gap, in my opinion. So 3.5 years ago, around that time, founded AECFoundry, and through sheer luck and word of mouth and network connections, we got our first client, Assembly OSM, startup in New York. We helped them build a very similar system to what we were doing at Lend-Lease, but tailored to their own workflows and processes, and helping them build the in-house technology team and the strategy to then implement the tooling platform and automation platform. They wanted to create a cohesive set of digital tools for their whole design process to bid for new projects. And then from there, it was just a bunch of different random clients that were very well aligned to sort of what we're really good at, which is this idea of bridging the gap between industry experience and technology development. And we started working in much broader sectors of the industry. So manufacturing, with some small and medium businesses that were looking to digitalize their processes and integrate technology, a lot of custom no-code and low-code automation solutions for them. And then last year, we got our first big enterprise US client, who's one of the top EPC contractors, working a lot in the renewables space, a lot of civil engineering. And that's opened up an incredibly interesting new sector for us, way more interesting than architecture, I must say. So everything to do with civil engineering and power engineering, electrical engineering, it's so already data driven, even though it's still very manual, but the sort of the processes are very well mapped out. It's based on equations and calculations. It's not sort of aesthetics and subjective opinion. So it's a much richer space to create impact through automation, and much easier, I must say, to implement some of these things. So that's where we're at today. Let me know if you have any more questions.
And that's such an interesting and exciting career ride, and it feels like you were always on top of the trends, grasshopper computational era, AI era, DFMA era, and uh, you see you as one of the few people who went from like computational design to professional software developer to entrepreneurship and startup route. I'm kind of curious to know who are the three people who guided you or you look forward to, because there's no roadmap for this kind of journey. Both.
Both. I really, I really don't want to put names on people, not so much because they don't come to mind, but because I don't want to exclude anyone else.
Mm.
Let's just say that I try today, I very much try and look as far beyond the industry as I can, especially in the last 2 years with what's happened with AI and everything. But I've always had this thing or idea of looking at how very different industries solve very similar problems and trying to bring both the technological approach but also the methodology behind people and process and how they manage these things to AEC and what we can learn from other industries, more so than I would say individual people. Impact in the past, I would say the most important people were my colleagues. It just happened. It's this type of profile is very hard to find, very, very hard to find, and it's very hard to build. Like it has, you asked like, how do you go through this thing? It's hard to replicate. Like it's hard to find the person that has both 15 years of time to go through these stages and then get to some endpoint. But it's also very difficult to find people that are truly and passionately generalists
Mm.
by nature, but they're also able to go very vertical when needed. So I would say, yeah, the colleagues I've had over the years were certainly the biggest impact.
You mentioned about the consultancy of AEC Foundry. What are your thoughts on the AI first consultancy of the future and how people are mentioning about outcome as a service model and like productivized service which has way higher profit margin? What are the opportunities you have identified? How are you integrating those practices in AEC Foundry?
Yeah, so I mean, AECFoundry, we're lucky enough to be born at this particular transition point, right? Large companies that are looking to sort of convert are looking at AI to either replace people or like, how do we fire a bunch of people like Klarna or, these stories that come out. It's like, oh, we fired everybody and we've got AI agents now. But for companies that are being born now, I think that's way more interesting, right? It's how do you outcompete much larger companies with very small teams that are able to leverage AI to 10x their productivity, but also the quality of the results, right? And I think that's where the opportunity is. And we're absolutely embracing this in everything that we do. And we've sort of semi automated pretty much every business process at some level with AI. And that's out of necessity, right? We can't hire a dedicated marketing team. We can't hire a dedicated software development team, not statically for like the duration of like a whole year. So what we do is we have a core team and everybody is like, 6 foot deep into this whole AI scene. Very, very good people that have transitioned very early into AI coding and you call it vibe coding now, but it didn't have a name before, but also building automations, which we build for clients, right? We do process automation, a lot of custom solutions for clients. We apply the same exact approaches to what we do. So we automate proposal generation, which has been a request from clients, and we use our own proposal generation to show them, this is how we do it. This is how you could do it as well. We just started releasing a newsletter on LinkedIn just last week, which is great. It's already got almost 1,000 subscribers. But the interesting thing there, I published that very transparently, saying this is the result of what we use internally as a briefing document, as a briefing weekly document, because we're all very passionate about this stuff. We read a bunch of stuff during the week. We share dozens of links with each other on our Slack, but all this information is hard to digest for each individual, right? If I need to absorb the information from another 6 people, I don't have the time. So we built essentially a content research assistant that gets interesting content for us from a whole series of different sources. And then we have automations that pick up the links that we share internally and summarize them and do research on them to create basically a content pool that we can then use to do another series of things. Social media content is one of them. Generating the newsletter is another. And then generating an internal newsletter, essentially, which is how we look at the content that we gather so that we can absorb more knowledge and stay ahead of the trends, both for ourselves and for our clients. So, that's one very topical example of a workflow, but we apply this to, as I said, to quoting and proposals generation. So we can do that very, very quickly. We have a standardized process for that. Social media content, outreach, marketing, all of that's automated. And we're scaling that as we go and improving it as we go. But that's where I think the opportunity is for new companies. It's like with a very tight core team, for like 5 people, you can easily work at the scale of like a 20-person team. And that's what we try and do in everything. We try and sort of streamline our own internal processes so that we have essentially more time to work on the stuff that's actually valuable, like the core business logic that an engineering client needs to productize. That's what we want to work on. We don't want to spend time on making proposals and admin and marketing and this sort of stuff.
Got it. And from your experience, do you foresee where now 20% engineering firm can be as efficient as 100% engineering firm with the automations, AI agents integrated in like uh I'm just translating, okay, this is tech first consultancy, but what is the version of tech first AEC firm?
5 years ago performed like 100-person engineering team by simply, doing better than just using spreadsheets. There's like so much stuff that you can do way before you get to AI. And most of it is related to people and process and not technology. Technology is like the thing that enables the people and the processes once you have the organization structured in a certain way and the processes mapped out. Often we think the opposite. It's like, oh yeah, use technology and that'll solve your processes and make your people happy, but it's not true at all. So yes, I think if someone, if we look at a previous path, career path, come out of engineering, come out of architecture, either you go and work for a firm or a studio, a big, small, whatever, or you start your own, right? Like that's the usual path is you do a couple of years in a studio and then you start your own. I think there's a golden opportunity for people to go and work in a traditional studio, understand what not to do or how to do it better, and then go and open an AI native, let's say, design studio or engineering firm, understanding, having understood all the pain points and friction points of the traditional workflows within traditional architecture and engineering. It's hard to do that just coming out of uni without the experience of what doesn't work. Like what do we do? What do people traditionally do? How do we compete with that? How do we make it better? But you need to find out first. And you see this all the time. Like any startup in AEC that is either straight out of uni, like, ideas straight out of uni, or it's external to the industry, like pure tech and product people building something for AEC. Typically, they have very, very high failure rates, right? Like domain expertise in this industry when you're building tech is absolutely critical.
That that's such a great point. Like working in those firms, you are so much ingrained in the process. So you inherently, like people sometimes say, few of the startup ideas is you're solving your own problems. So if you face those problems while working in those firms, you can do automation in a much more efficient way. But what's your version of digital transformation in this age? I'm guessing initial versions of for big firms there were like earlier CRM or cloud transformation was version, then training, Grasshopper, and software onboarding, and just giving them what are the latest tools out there and use this in your processes. I think this is like third wave of digital transformation for big firms. So what do you think? Is it getting the data in a LLM or format? So data transformation is also a big play in this for upcoming.
Yeah, I think it's still the same. This industry has repeatedly failed over these waves of transformation, right? And unfortunately, it's still the same. Like we talk to clients who are literally implementing Revit for the first time, like massive clients, right? Or BIM or, cloud. Like let's move our on-premise data to the cloud. It's still a thing today. Like for most companies, they're still at that stage. I see it as a bit of a danger for them to, what's the word, dog leap
Mm,
over those steps and go straight to the latest technology. I think there's, even with AI, the latest technology is great. Like there's opportunities for it, but you need to apply it where you need to leverage it for what it's good for, not just like AI blanket solution for all of my problems. There's a lot of AI and ML stuff that has been around for decades now that is super robust and like super validated, and like the problems have been solved over and over again. There's models that are perfectly trained and very accurate for a lot of business problems. But companies are like, how do you do this with an LLM? Right? Oh, can you build an agent that does this? Instead of picking up off the shelf robust solutions that have been around for a long time and can be used today. So a lot of the advice that we give in terms of digital transformation is don't look at the latest thing, like look for the most appropriate thing that will give you the most reliable result. Some things you can't do without, right? Like if you want to do, semantic knowledge retrieval, you have to use RAG and all that stuff and LLMs. Like you're not going to do it with some other model, right? Keyword search doesn't work as well and so on. So yeah, I would say the digital transformation needs to be aligned, one, with business objectives. It needs to come from process first, right? Not the technology. So reimagining the processes and re-engineering those processes based on what you can do today, right? As opposed to tacking on an LLM or AI solution onto an existing process that kind of sucks. I think that's the key in terms of digital transformation. And then, of course, depending on the size of the company, there's going to be very different goals and objectives and very different practical applications. We advise small to medium companies not to build software. We don't build software just because we can. It's very hard to maintain. It's very expensive, and the return on investment is very hard to justify for a small company, right? Like why would you build a custom CRM? Like why would you build a custom ERP? So for those companies, we expose them to more modern tools, or if there's something that works for them out of the box, great. If not, we expose them to modern tools and modern approaches based on no code and low code automation solutions. And again, we bring technology that's typically not used in the industry into the industry, right? You hardly ever hear AEC workflows being solved or automated with Make.com or N8N or Airtable. It's rare. And the reason for that is that those companies don't see AEC as a market. They're blind to it. So none of their marketing is going to target a construction manager or like an
Mm,
architect or an engineer. They don't care, or maybe they don't know. I'm not sure. But the industry is exposed to like industry specific software, which absolutely sucks. Like if anyone tries to sell you an AEC specific project management software or like an AEC specific CRM or like a timesheet software, just turn the other way, because there's no point in getting those things. They never work as well as they should, and they're just trying to fill a sort of a gap in knowledge of the industry and what's available. So we typically, for small and medium companies, we found that no code and low code automation tools work really, really well. Of course, they have to be a little bit forward thinking, and they need to have people internally that want to own these things in the future. But for them, we build the stuff, but we help them take it over and own it. So by the time, like, we put ourselves out of a job basically through the course of our relationship, and that's our goal. It's the company can stand on their own 2 feet. They've discovered very new ways of working, and they've grasped the fundamentals of workflow automation and data, at least at a very basic level. And through these tools, each department can now go and build their own. And that's what we like to see, right? We leave when we can see that they start, instead of asking us, like, oh, can you add this to the table, or can you add this automation in the back end? They come to us and they say, hey, we built this automation. Can you have a look? Like, it's working pretty great, but maybe you have some ideas, right? And that's the point where you've done the job well for these smaller companies. For massive companies, for enterprise clients who typically will have IT teams internally or development teams or tech teams, for them we're a strategic partner, both at a consulting and strategic level, in terms of how do we conceptualize these initiatives at a very high level, what are the objectives, how do we break it down, what are the opportunities, and so on. And then all the way down to, here's an initiative, we want to productize some workflow, your expertise in a specific domain. How do we do that? How do we build a product? And then we bring that whole product thinking and product development strategy to that part of the work. And then finally, there's the implementation side of thing, which is the pure logic that we go and write algorithms for optimization, a lot of machine learning there as well. And that's sort of the nuts and bolts of the solutions that we build.
Since you have been in industry and work with multiple like AECO manufacturing companies and building tools as well as consulting big firms, for founders listening and who are building startup tools for them and ranging from like $10,000 annual contract value to 50,000 or 100, can you share your advice how these big firms make decisions on software purchases, how to position so the sales cycles are shorter?
You can do absolutely nothing about the sales cycles. They're completely out of your control. And this is the biggest hurdle, I think. We tried that route. So we got a couple of products, as I mentioned before. We do services. That's our main source of revenue. But we also develop products, right? We use, again, a lot of AI to develop products very quickly. And because you can do that, we've sort of shortened or shortcutted the prototyping cycle from just visual prototyping in Figma, which you would typically do in the past, to just prototype the actual application, back end, front end, and everything, which puts us in a position to quickly develop ideas, but also deploy them and test them on the market. So, we've got a couple of products that are related to safety compliance. Archie, which is a building code copilot, we launched in Australia first and then expanded to the UK and now Italy. And then another platform for safety observations and field data collection again, for the safety, to see safety management. But we build those very, very quickly. Like, we get to the to the sort of, let's say, MVP stage in what you would get to a Figma prototype before, right? That's what we've seen, and that's the opportunity. So putting those products out gives us a chance to collect a lot of user data, especially with these conversational products, and understand the industry much, much better. Now, for us, the flywheel is we went down I built most of these products single-handedly because of being able to leverage AI, which is great. However, going through that whole sort of startup accelerator VC, I'm a little bit disenchanted with that, and I think it's there's an opportunity for something different, something new at this point in time, right? I think because you can leverage AI, why do you need VCs? Like if you can get to an MVP with like two people, you don't need investment for a whole development team, and if you can automate your marketing, then you don't need a marketing investment. So like really we're talking about, two friends that sit in a room for like a couple of months and can technically build an awesome product, right? And they can sell it. They can like sell it directly to businesses. However, that only works for like small to medium businesses and like B2C products. When you're talking enterprise, right? The only thing that I found that works for us, and this is like it's become our flywheel, is provide services, right? Those services provide enough profit and revenue to invest in internal R&D instead of spending it on marketing and business development, right? Because we automate that. Can't automate the R&D, right? So we invest in R&D to research new models, new techniques, new methodologies, stay up to date with everything that's going on, and develop products. Like if we get an idea, we're like, we're working with this client, we're working with this other client, maybe there's some crossover ideas that we think maybe there's something here. We'll go and actually just develop that because we're not spending money on all the other admin stuff and trying to grow the company. We'll spend money on building the product. Then we put it out to market and we use it to have conversations with potential enterprise clients that will then reach out because of the product, but we introduce them to the consultancy. And whoever reaches out for the consultancy, we introduce them to the products. And the products they're always put out there for small to medium business. That's the kind of the framing we give it because we can get a lot of data quickly because they'll use it. Enterprises won't use it. So with enterprises that then reach out or we reach out to them, we tell them, look, we put out this product. It's super useful. This is the data that we've got. This is what it does. But we know that you're never going to use it because of cybersecurity and data privacy and all this stuff. So what we focused on is building a modular infrastructure underneath these products that gives us the building blocks to very quickly deploy a custom version of it, which is private and secure for an enterprise client. And that gets us in the door very quickly because we go through the security is basically, it's on you. It's like whatever you want, wherever you want it deployed, we can deploy it. Typically in the AEC industry, everything runs on Microsoft mostly.
Mm.
If we've got modular infrastructure that's built on Microsoft Azure, it's very easy to redeploy that privately and customize it and tailor it very quickly for an enterprise client. And the other problem with enterprise clients is that, if you have a front end, they might not care about it. They might be interested in the functionality, but they'll want to integrate it into existing front ends and, mobile applications, employee portals, things like that. So they'll have a lot of systems in place. They don't want to add more systems. That's the last thing enterprises want to do is add more software. They're already drowning in it. So for us, like coming back to that service as a product as a service idea, for us, this is it. This is like, we commercialize products for small to medium businesses, get a lot of user data, and then we can use that as our portfolio to pitch custom solutions and tailored solutions for enterprise clients.
I think this is a growth hack which you just shared, like or a really very unique pipeline for our industry. With a typical GTM pipeline is okay, you go with pilot with big clients, foundry, do a project, and then you upsell it for the whole company on multiple projects. But this with doing service, identify opportunities, make a SMB product, do better data. Because I also feel that enterprise want multiple integrations and customization. So that SMB product becomes a door that, oh, this is the possibility you have back. It's not just a POC or something. So that's a very interesting GTM or a growth tactic. I'm also wondering, what are the typical frictions you get in terms of adoption or selling into enterprise? Some people do like top down or bottom up bottom if since in enterprise, like depending on the persona, they might not use your SMB product because like, okay, our data being shared. So I'm guessing it's mostly top down where the decision maker you pitch.
Yeah, yeah. Often I see that whoever is selecting software or whoever is responsible for looking, evaluating, identifying doesn't know much about product and software. That's the problem, right? They're looking at it from what's going to solve my problem. And that always takes them directly to AEC specific vendors who, as I mentioned before, typically kind of suck at building products, right? We have very ugly legacy style products in general. That's what you think of when you think like AEC specific piece of software, right? So I don't think they have the right people doing the research and evaluating the options that are out there, which is great for us because that's part of our services, right? It's like education and helping people understand this. It's like there's better stuff out there. It's just maybe not AEC specific, but it's generic enough that you could totally use it. So I think that's one friction point is like the people selecting the software do it top down, but they don't really have the knowledge and patience to evaluate the landscape. So they just wait to get pitched, and whoever comes through the door first is like, hey, we solve your problem. It's like, oh, cool, I'll buy it. And then how much is a subscription? It's this much. Can I afford it? Okay, I'll take it. That's pretty much like what happens. It's they want something that's instantly ready to go and scalable. So like if you're at the point where you're looking for a pilot or testing, it's very, very hard. I would say that's more you'll have better luck based on network connections than trying to do it through outreach. Like try get connected to some technological champion within the company who has enough influence on the money side of things that can make a decision to work with you. That's the only way I found that works. Like trying to do outreach to just random people in the company, they might be super into it, but the friction point is that typically the person who's the champion doesn't have the money, and typically the person who
Mm.
controls the money doesn't care. It's hard to find that person who's both in these companies. But that's like for us, that's the golden client. It's like when you find these people that are both the champions and the decision makers, but they're rarely the same. Like for us, that's a massive friction point. And the other friction point is when at least working with enterprise is the whole contractual side of things, going through that whole supplier registration and setting things up and setting service agreements up and contractual agreements up and NDAs and all of that stuff. It takes a long time. It's annoying. It has to be done, but it's not exactly the fun or pleasant part of working with enterprise. And then the last friction point I would say, and this is definitely the biggest one, absolutely the biggest one, is cybersecurity, especially with anything related to AI. As soon as you say AI, the association is large language models and open AI, and this belief that somehow this secret sauce of the company and data is like leaking everywhere, and Sam Altman is using it on the weekend to, spy on on your company or something. But it's like we try and get around that, but that is a massive, massive, massive obstacle. And it's always the first step. Like when you talk, as soon as you say I have a product, they're like, okay, great, sounds good. Let's get the cybersecurity team involved. Here's the questionnaire, and you got 200 questions to fill in. They take like 4 weeks, and they start, scrutinizing every single little component in your back end. And that's to me, that's the biggest one. It's the biggest friction point to innovation because they try and implement cybersecurity as a policy on experimental and research-based products where you don't even know what you're going to build
Yeah,
yet.
what if
So
it's
it's like,
not even useful?
yeah, yeah, exactly.
That adds another month to the sales cycle. And is SOC 2 the only approach, or like if deploying on their cloud infrastructure and using that questionnaire typically solves the problem? Because SOC 2 itself is a investment heavy initiative.
It's that definitely helps. If you're able to just, build it on what they already own, yes, that's great. It certainly helps, but you still have to go through the whole process. It's not that like there's no getting away from it.
Got it. And any advice to people in terms of pricing or lessons learned? The perspective I'm coming from is depending on the company you're targeting, they have quarterly budget. Okay, let's spend 10K or 50K on tech. So sometimes if your product is $20,000 versus $10,000, and suddenly the 10K, because it's within their budget, it gets so that is one thing. And timing, sometimes US makes decision in Q4 about the budget or Q1. So if you are pitching, okay, we already got budget allocation, let's allocate some to this startup or product. So timing and budget wise, any key insight?
generally think clients are very different across the board, how they manage and distribute funding for these things. Sometimes it's centralized, sometimes it's decentralized to all departments and different business units and things like that. You have to target the right one, to get access to that money. One thing that is true though is that especially at enterprise, and I guess it's client dependent. You have to find out going through the process, but there's typically some figure, like some arbitrary figure that is either instantly approved or almost instantly approved, right? It's like a magic number. And you just basically have to kind of ask them straight out and just say, I know there's a magic number. What is it? That in terms of pricing, like that, and they'll typically tell you because the person who you're talking to is not responsible for the profits of the company. All they care about is getting their initiative off the ground and building something useful. So whatever it takes, right? So if you go in and you find out there's some number, you just scope things out based around, what you can do with that number because that's going to get you through the process quicker. And typically enterprises, again, you'll hardly ever get them unless you've got unless you're a massive consultancy, obviously, but you'll never get them to commit to like a big budget. Like you can't go to an enterprise and say, oh, hey, here's, at least in consultancy, if you're a small consultancy, you can't go to them and say, hey, write me up a contract for a year for $1 million and we'll work together through the year. They'll stage it and, you need to build trust and work with them and show them what you can do and how you can do it and how you deliver. And slowly those budgets get bigger, right, as the trust increases. So it's very much with enterprise, it's very much a relationship building exercise that takes a long time, and you just have to be patient and stick to
Yeah,
it.
that's a good point because I was also trying to figure out the arbitrary number because if your software is double that amount, you can just like create two modules and for sell the first module and then upsell in the back end when you develop trust like 3 months or 6 months later, incrementally increase the lifetime value of that customer. But if just how to get into the door fast is what we are cracking.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a bunch of different pricing models. A lot of software companies try to price based on project value, for example, in AEC, which is amazing if you can do it because like the project value is enormous and it's variable. So it means your software, even though it's doing exactly the same thing for a company that makes 2 million in revenue and it's doing exactly the same thing for a company that does 1 billion in revenue. But if it's project-based pricing, then you're going to make sort of profit-based margins on depending on the size and revenue and how many projects and how big they are each company makes. But the disadvantage there is that you have to onboard every project because you need to figure out how much it is and the contract value. So you need a sales cycle for every new project they want to put on your product or platform or whatever. Subscription based is obviously, I mean, until now it's been the sort of the golden ticket, but again with AI and service as a product models, I think that's also going to change.
There's so many interesting framework and insight I got in this interview. Like, thanks a lot for being so transparent in what's working, what's not, and from all your experience, what you learned. Last question: what is things which we didn't cover in this interview, and based on your experience, you'd like to share thoughts, any hot take, or a lot of noise you see on LinkedIn, and like, oh, this is bullshit stuff.
I don't know. What haven't we covered? I mean, I could talk hours about this stuff, of course. I think there's a whole aspect of product thinking and product management that I think is super important to talk about when it comes to digital transformation and innovation and like the types of roles and organizational structures that enable those processes and why they're missing from AEC companies. We could talk about the fact that enterprises typically are convinced that their IT teams are like product teams and that computational designers are software engineers, but these things are not true. And when you start try and leverage both of those roles as such, doesn't work out well, right? There's some missing concepts, I think, in the industry to build technology. I think that's a really important conversation to have, but another time.
Also feel I'd love to know your opinion. Maybe in the part two of there are few firms who can afford to hire software developers to do internal products, but they also struggle a lot in adoption or building scalable or useful product, even though it's internal. So like how to crack that problem is also a big topic to discuss.
Absolutely.
All right. Lovely hosting you, Guido. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mayur. It was a great conversation. Thanks for having me.